Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you attending here in person and also by Zoom, thank you for being here with us. We are gonna start, this is our first workshop for the year 2024, and it's about legal considerations for starting a small business. Thank you and Happy New Year. My name is Marieli Blanco Gonzalez and I'm the Business Tax Analyst for the City of Port St. Lucie. With me today, we have our Business Manager, Yvonne Grayson, our Business Tax Coordinator, Anna, and thank you so much for being here today. We have a couple of things that I have to mention. Please silent or mute your electronic device. Please feel free to raise your hand for comments or questions, and this is an open forum, so please feel free to ask questions, and this workshop is being recorded. Also, for those of you that are attending this workshop, we are offering a 15% off the activation application fee for this if you plan to do a business with us. Okay, today we have our presenter is an attorney, Wendy Wilson. She is with the Legal Services of Greater Miami and is the Advocacy Director of Community Economic Development. She has over 30 years of experience in real estate, corporate experience, and various law firms based in Miami. Ms. Wendy was born and raised in Tallahassee, Florida, and received her bachelor's in science magna cum laude from the Florida State and her Juris Doctor with honors from the Levin College of Law at the University of Florida, where she was a member of the University of Florida Law Review and a legal research and writing fellowship instructor. Ms. Wendy is also a Florida Supreme Court certified circuit civil mediator, a qualified arbitrator, and a licensed real estate salesperson. Ms. Wendy, thank you so much for being here with us, and this is all yours.
Okay, thank you for that kind introduction. And hello, everybody. Happy New Year. And we're going to be going over some considerations that you should have before you start a small business, or, keep in mind for any small business that you have. Okay, I first have to give you a disclaimer, excuse me, that this is just general legal information. It's not specific legal advice. I'm not giving each one of you legal advice or opinions. And this is not an exhaustive list of all the legal considerations. And then we recommend that if you want further, more in-depth information, that you should consult with a qualified legal counsel or tax professional as they relate to your specific situation. And lastly, we do not have an attorney-client relationship, just as part of this presentation. So the things we're going to talk about today are your initial startup considerations before you start a business, choosing the business structure, the Corporate Transparency Act, and I put that in red because that's all new, and a lot of people don't know about that yet, and it's going to be one more thing that you have to do with your business. And then we're going to talk about common business filings that you need to do on a fairly regular basis. Then we're going to go over business contracts and some things that you want to keep in mind with those. So basically, Legal Services of Greater Miami, we're part of a collaborative project called the Florida Community Development Legal Project. And it's a collaboration of nonprofit legal providers throughout the state of Florida. And we represent nonprofit organizations and small businesses that are owned by low to moderate income individuals. We cover the areas right now of Miami-Dade, Monroe, the Panhandle area, Jacksonville, St. Pete, and Central Florida, but unfortunately, not Broward, Palm Beach, or Treasure Coast right now. And some of the types of things that we help small businesses with, or nonprofits, are incorporation, drafting your governance documents, license and regulatory applications, contract drafting, dispute resolution, and real estate closings and financing transactions. So now let's move on to your initial startup considerations. The first thing we always recommend is that you have a business plan written down on paper, what you're actually going to do with your business. Now, this is not a legal requirement, but it really should be the first step in starting your business. And it's not a static document. It changes with time as your business develops and grows, but you should always be planning on paper. And if you're seeking financing or funding for your business, most likely your lender is going to ask to see your business plan. You certainly don't want to go to a meeting with a lender and not have anything in writing. And usually before we accept a small business or even a potential nonprofit for a client, I ask to see their business plan. And again, even though it's not a legal requirement, if you haven't taken the time to put something in writing and put pencil to paper, then we don't want to waste our time and spin our wheels if you can't even write something down, if you don't even have a plan written down. Then moving along, the next thing you want to think about is what's the name of your business going to be? The first thing that you need to do is check to make sure that the name is available and that it's not in use or trademarked by another business. If it's a trademarked name, you could have a lawsuit for infringement. Like if you're going to put the words, let's say, Coca-Cola in the name of your business, that's going to be a real problem for you. So one of the first things to check is you can go online with the Florida Department of State, the Division of Corporations. Their website is sunbiz.org. And you can just look, whatever name you think that you want to use, type it in and see if somebody's already using it. Because if they are, they're not going to let you register that name as a business. And then the type of business structure that you're going to have is also going to affect your business name. If you're a corporation, you're going to have to include the words corporation, incorporated, Inc., something to let the public know that you're a corporation. If you're going to be a limited liability company, again, the name is going to have to include limited liability company or LLC. One thing to keep in mind is once you file the articles of incorporation, that's for a corporation, or the articles of organization, that's what you file to start an LLC. Once you file those with the state of Florida, that's not the same thing as trademarking your name. That's a whole different process, and I just wanted to point that out. Trademarking can be done on the state and federal level, but it's not this, just because you've chosen that name for your business does not mean that you have trademarked it, so you don't really have any legal protections for that name. So let's talk about some of the common business entities that you can have. The first and the simplest is the sole proprietor, and that requires no registration with the state of Florida. And that is something that's a business that's owned by a single individual. So there's no distinction between the individual and the business. And there's personal liability for the business debts because the business and the owner are the same person, same entity. When you have a sole proprietorship, the business name has to include the individual's name. So it needs to be, for example, John Smith Landscaping, or, Mary Jones, hair salon, something like that. Has to include your name. If you're not going to include your individual name, then you have to file a fictitious name registration. So for example, if your name was Mary Smith and you wanted to open a salon, but you wanted to call it, I'm just grasping at straws here, Happy Hair Salon, You would have to file a fictitious name registration for Happy Hair, and then you would put that, Mary Smith is the owner of that fictitious name registration. This is also known as a DBA, or doing business as. The second form of business structure is a partnership. And again, that really requires no filing with the state of Florida. And that's just two or more people that go into business together, and they're not really registered. It's just hopefully an agreement between you that is written down. We'll talk more about that later. Unfortunately, far too many people go into business partnerships and it's just a handshake agreement, and we'll again talk more about this later in the presentation about why that is not a good idea. But there is a statute, Chapter 620 of the Florida statutes. So if there isn't a written partnership agreement, then this chapter in the Florida statutes governs, how your partnership will work and how it will be dissolved and the assets will be handled, that type of thing. And that may not be what you want. That may not be what you thought you were getting into. So again, that would be a good reason to have your agreement in writing. Third type of company that you can have is the limited liability company, or the LLC. So that's a separate legal entity from the owners, and the owners of an LLC are called members. And an LLC provides more liability protection for the owners. So you can have a single member LLC, or a multiple member or multi-member. And it can either be managed by the members or it can be managed by a separate manager. And LLCs exist on state law. In Florida, it's Chapter 605 of the Florida statutes. And to set up an LLC, you register with the Florida Department of State and you file articles of organization. And then thereafter, every year, you file an annual report with the Department of State to remain active. And then the other major business entity that we'll talk about is corporations. And the owners of a corporation are known as shareholders. And corporations have more formalities than an LLC. For instance, you have to meet at least once annually. That's required by the statute. You have to keep minutes. Again, that's required by the statute. And you need to have a board of directors that makes your corporate decisions. And to set up a corporation, you register with the Florida Department of State and you file articles of incorporation. And then after that initial filing, every year thereafter, you file an annual report. Do we have any questions right now about any of this, or should we move? Oh.
So for an LLC, you file articles of, is it incorporation or something else?
Okay, the question was for an LLC, do you file articles of incorporation? No, you file articles of organization.
And you have to file annually. What do you file annually?
Annually, you file an annual report. So the first year that you file the articles of organization, and thereafter it's the annual report.
Is there a format for the annual report? How would I find it?
It's on Sunbiz.
SUNBIZ?
Yeah, sunbiz.org. And you'll get a little email from the Division of Corporations letting you know that you have to file your annual report. And then the form will be right there. You can do it online. Okay, so now I'll just mention a few less common business structures, but just so that you'll be familiar with them. There is a limited partnership. There's limited liability partnerships. There's professional associations, professional corporations, and professional limited liability companies. Usually limited partnerships, they're used with complex real estate transactions. That's usually where you see limited partnerships. And then the professional associations, corporations, and LLCs, those are limited to businesses that provide professional services, such as doctors, lawyers, architects, that type of thing. So one thing that I wanted to go over, and I put it in red, is the Corporate Transparency Act filing. This was a federal law that was passed to combat money laundering, and it became effective on January 21st, 2020. And it requires a filing with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. And if you already have a business that's in existence, you've already filed your articles of incorporation or your articles of organization, you have a year, or you have until January 1st, 2025 to make your filing. If you're starting a new business this year, or any year after this year when the law went into effect, you have 90 days to make your FinCEN filing. Now, there are exemptions to this law there's 23 exemptions in total, but most of the exemptions, they relate to large publicly traded corporations, nonprofits, and financial institutions, and because they already have reporting requirements with the federal government. So this falls pretty squarely on, small to medium-sized businesses. So the Corporate Transparency Act doesn't require an annual filing, but you do have to update your filing anytime there's a change in the reported information. And the updated reports are due within 30 days of the change. So let's talk a little bit more about what a FinCEN filing would be. Oh, excuse me, there's a question.
Does it indicate where you're supposed to make this filing?
Okay, the question was, does it indicate where you're supposed to make the filing? And yes, it does, and I have the information on another slide. But there is a website where you can go ahead and make your filing, and they are primed to accept filings now. So one of the things that you can do to make things easier if you think that you may have to make frequent reports is you can get a FinCEN identifier, which is like a unique identifying number strictly for reporting purposes. Now, this isn't required, but it alleviates the need every time you go in to make a change of having to supply your driver's license number and your ID that would otherwise be required. And as you'll see as we go along, some businesses, if they frequently have changes, you could be making reports several times a year, and it'll probably just get really annoying to keep having to upload your driver's license or input that information again. So if you just had this identifier number, it would make things a little easier.
And how do you get that?
Well, you can apply online for the identifier.
And what's the website?
Well, let me see. Where did I put the website? I'm sorry. Now I've...
Just Google FinCEN?
Yeah, I thought I put it on one of these slides, so let me just keep going. I'm sorry. I got... Was it on the... Oh, there it is. Okay, I didn't... yeah, so as you see at the bottom, more information, that's where the website is. But yeah, if you just, Google FinCEN filing for small businesses, you'll come up with this. So let's go back. So the reporting requirement is that you have to report all the beneficial owners. And that means basically anybody that owns more than 25% of the business or anybody that controls the business. So for instance, if you have a corporation and you've got shareholders, the shareholders that own more than 25% of the business have to be reported. But if the corporation is run by, say, a CEO or a president, and that's different from the shareholders, that person also has to be reported. So it's anybody that owns more than 25% of the entity, or they control the entity. Now, I'm sorry, I'm clicking here. If the company was filed this year or thereafter, a new filing, you're also going to have to report the company applicants. And these are the people that directed the filing, say the supervisor, and maybe it is all the same person, but sometimes you'll have a company and you've got the CEO, and maybe there's been some sort of change, and then a middle manager will say, okay, we need to do a filing. So that person that's directing the filing has to be reported, as well as the person that actually does the filing. Maybe the middle manager has his administrative assistant do the filing, so now we've got two people that would have to be reported additionally. But this doesn't apply to businesses that were already in existence prior to January 1st of this year. So the information that you're going to have to report about each beneficial owner or controlling person is you're going to need the name, date of birth, address, and that's a street address, not a P.O. box, and not the business address. Because again, the whole purpose of this is to combat money laundering, so they don't want a bunch of business addresses or post office boxes. And then you're going to have to give the identifying number and issuer from either a U.S. driver's license or a passport or some other local government official ID. And they have to be non-expired. And you have to upload a copy of the image of your driver's license or passport. And if the person doesn't have any of those, then it can be a non-expired foreign passport. But again, this division wants to know who owns all of these, small corporations, because, they don't like the idea of shell corporations. I know you've all heard of those, which are just layer upon layers of company, and it's hard to get down to who actually owns and controls them. And then I had mentioned before that every time there's a change in the information, you have to file an updated report. So examples of changes that require updates are changing the name of the company or a new DBA, because sometimes a single business will have a number of different DBAs. They'll be known as, just a lot of different names, and they'll have several different DBAs. So anytime you start doing business under a new DBA, that would require a filing. If there's a change in management, question?
If we already have a DBA, like we just filed it one time, right? It's just a change.
Right, yes. The question was if you already have the DBA, you only file initially, it's only whenever you change it, and that would be correct. That would be captured in the initial filing, and as long as there was no change, there wouldn't be no need to do that.
Do we know, I know that this is brand new for the consumer, for the customers. Do we know if this department is reaching out to the new businesses or to the old businesses also? Like how people are knowing about this? Because we are trying to be proactive in our office to explain that this just passed now in January 2024, but a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, according to the website, it says that this department has been reaching out and trying to make people aware of it, but I'm not really sure. Of course, I know about it being an attorney, and I, have courses that we can take on it. I read the law, but as someone that is involved with several LLCs personally, not, in my capacity with legal services, like the registered agent, I've never seen anything that has come across, my desk. My significant other who owns small businesses hasn't seen anything. And the first time he heard of it was whenever I told him. So I'm not sure how much information is actually getting out to small business owners right now. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to other changes that require updates. So change in management, new 25% ownership, death of a previously reported beneficial owner, and changes in the reported information of a beneficial owner, i.e. name, someone gets married or divorced, address, you just move, or you get a new driver's license, like maybe you move states and now you've got a different driver's license number. That is something that would require an updated report. So just to recap with these filings, you've got the initial report, which for a brand new business started in 2024, you've got 90 days. And then if you had an existing business formed before that, you have until the end of this year to file. Your updates, that would be a change in beneficial ownership, more than 25%, or control. So president, manager, CEO, that type of thing. Change in information previously reported for a beneficial owner. They changed their name, they changed their address, got a different type of ID, change in the business name or DBA, and these changes are due in 30 days after the change occurs. So for more information, I've got the website there, and then there is a guide. The second website listed here is a guide to the filings that are required. And it's a really good guide. I think it's, the long one. Should I read these out? Okay. So the website to do your filing is https:// BOIE filing dot FinCEN, FINCEN .gov /. So that's where the filing occurs. But then if you'd like to get a copy of the compliance guide, that would be at https:// www.fincen.gov /sites /default /files /share d /BOI _small_compliance_guide V like Victor 1.1 -final.pdf. I know.
You don't have to repeat it, but we're putting it in the chat and it isn't available in the handout.
Okay, so for those of you that are with us online, it is in the chat. So that was excruciating for me to read out, but it is in the chat. And the interesting thing about the guide, it's available in a lot of different languages. It's not just Spanish and Creole. There's Chinese, Vietnamese. So whatever your, the language you're most comfortable in, there's probably a guide for you. So moving away from the FinCEN filing, we'll just talk about internal operating agreements that you need for your business. So if you have a corporation, you're going to have bylaws. And if you're going to have an LLC, you'll have an operating agreement. And the purpose of both of these documents is to detail the operational and financial management of the business entity. It's going to spell out the rights and responsibilities of the parties. Now, your operating agreement or your bylaws, these are not filed anywhere. They're not on file with the Secretary of State's office. But you may need to provide these if you go to open your business checking account, or if you go to apply for a loan, they may want to see these, but it's nothing that's filed.
They've never asked me for it, only asked me for it.
Yeah. But I think it just depends on where you open the account, you know.
If an LLC is one person like me, why would I have an operating?
Well, the question was, why, if it's a single-member LLC, would you have an operating agreement? And the main thing we advise our clients is because it's just another indicia of a properly organized business, and that it was not just an individual trying to hide their assets and their income in a business, that it really is a separate business. And it's also good, but we'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the things that we like to have, even our single-member LLCs put in the operating agreement, has to do with what happens if you, the single member, becomes disabled or deceased. What happens with the business? And that can be taken care of in the operating agreement so that your business doesn't just flounder. If, for instance, you were disabled or you die and your business languishes while your family goes through probate, you can take care of that in an operating agreement. So examples of some of the provisions that you would have in either one of these documents would be the contribution of capital, how much was actually contributed to the business. That's a good way to document that. How profits and losses are going to be distributed, voting rights, how the business will be managed, dispute resolution, and succession planning, which I just mentioned. So it's very important to keep the business separate and to follow corporate or LLC formalities, because one of the reasons that you're actually setting up this independent entity is for liability limitation. So if you really don't keep your business life and your personal life separate, if there were ever a situation where a creditor were to come after you for a business debt, or, if there was some personal injury judgment or something like that, a court could, it's called piercing the corporate veil, if a judge were to say that there really wasn't a difference between the individual and the business. Question? Well, yeah, let me go on. So we always recommend separate bank accounts, separate contracts, and separate records. Like you have a business filings, group, and then you have your personal stuff. And this is, very important if you want to avail yourself of the liability protections for corporate entities. You need to treat the assets of the business separate from your personal assets. You should not be using the company assets if they are individual assets. For instance, you probably shouldn't put your personal home in your business name, that type of thing. Then you need to make sure that you have an adequately capitalized business. Because there can be personal liability for failing to adequately capitalize your business. And then you need to keep this is why we say this is another indicia of having a separate entity, by having an operating document or bylaws, because you keep that document updated regularly. You keep minutes of your meetings, keep your status active with the Secretary of State's office, and then document your business activities and keep good records. And then that should, by doing all of these different things, that should alleviate, a court, if you were to be sued by a creditor or by a personal injury claimant, it should, it should help so that the corporate veil isn't pierced. Unfortunately, too many small businesses, and we see this a lot, they'll pay a lot of personal expenses from the business account. You'll go through there and you'll see, hair salon, you see nails, you see, all sorts of things. You see McDonald's for the kids and just all of these different things in there that are not proper business expenses, and you really don't want to do that. You want to use the business account for legitimate business expenses and your personal account for your personal expenses. So this slide, we're going to go over some of the common filings for small businesses. So we already went over the FinCEN filings that you now have to do. But, you know, one of the things that you'll need to do for your business is applying for an employer identification number or an EIN. That's basically the social security number for your business. And you can do that easily and electronically through the IRS's website. Your tax professional, you know, your CPA, or your bookkeeper can help you with that, but you can do it very easily online. And be very careful, because there are a lot of ads that pop up that look like it's the IRS website. And you go through the whole process and you've input all your information, and then suddenly there's a request for your credit card, you know, for $40 or something like that. That means that you clicked on the wrong site. There's absolutely no charge to do this through the IRS website. So just make sure you're not clicking on an ad and you're actually going to irs.gov. We talked about filing your articles of organization or amendment articles of organization or incorporation initially. But if you have amendments, if you make changes, those are going to need to be filed. And all of this information, your articles and any amendments, as well as your annual reports, those are all public records, and they're available on Sunbiz. So anyone can see your articles and your annual reports and see who your registered agent is, you know, who the members are, who the manager is, that type of thing. But as I mentioned, your bylaws, your operating agreement are not filed. They're not public. You're probably going to need to get a business tax receipt. That sounds like that's your department. And that was formerly referred to as an occupational license. But almost every business, you know, even if you're operating out of your home, you need an occupational license. And generally, because each municipality and county is a little different, but generally it's going to be required for every location where a business operates. So if you have a store and you've got 2 locations, you need 2 business tax receipts.
Where do you get that at?
You get that at, well, depending on where you live, you get it at the county office or probably at the city. If you live within a municipality, you probably have to get one from the municipality as well as the county. But that varies depending on where you live, so you would have to search that online. So do you... So if you live in Port St. Lucie County, you can, or is it, if you live in the city of Port St. Lucie, you can contact the business tax office of the city, and they'll give you the information. But do you also have to file with the county?
That depends where they live.
Oh, so depending on where you live in the county, you may need to file with the county as well.
So when you say where you live, so if we're expanding and opening a business in another, or opening the same business in another city, we do that city. So basically where you're doing business.
Yes. So the question was, you know, if you're expanding and going to a different city, would you have to file there? And the answer is probably you should check. So, you know, if you are here in Port St. Lucie and then you're opening a business up in Fort Pierce, you should definitely check with the city of Fort Pierce. And that's a different county, isn't it?
It's the same county,
Oh, it's the same county.
but they have to register.
Okay. So you should, anywhere you do that, you should check. So since there's 67 counties in Florida, I don't know, and I can't even begin to say how many municipalities there are. I don't know, but, you know, mainly familiar with Miami-Dade and Broward, but just check with wherever your office is, and that applies even if you're operating out of your home. And one other thing, if you are operating out of your home and you have a homeowners association or a condo association, you should check and make sure that you're not in violation of those covenants. So excuse me. Okay, another common filing is going to be your annual report. I had mentioned this before, and this is filed annually, and the purpose is to update the state and the general public regarding any changes or lack of changes to the information that was originally filed about your business. Right now, it's due May 1st of every year, and then there's a fee due with the annual report. And there is a non-negotiable late fee. Currently, it's $400 for failure to file on May 1st, or by May 1st. So they don't care what happened, you need to file. Now, occasionally, like during COVID, was one of the first times that I saw where the deadline was expanded and people got a reprieve and they could file late. And usually it'll happen if there was, well, May and April, that's not really hurricane season, but if there was some sort of, natural disaster in an area of the state, they may extend the deadline for that area. But generally, if you file on May 2nd, you have to pay an extra $400, no ifs, ands, or buts. So make sure you calendar this and get it done
So you're saying
by that
there's a
date.
charge for doing this? There is a charge? Or there's a normal charge?
Yeah.
What is, do you know what that is?
Well, it depends on whether it's an LLC or a corporation, but it's roughly, give or take, $100 depending on which entity it is you're updating. It might be $125, but $125 for LLCs. But I usually don't do the filings, so, but anyway, so it's an annual fee, call it a tax or whatever you want, but it's something that, the businesses have to pay. And then, sorry, let me just take another sip of water. My voice is getting scratchy. Another type of filing is the fictitious name. We've also talked about this, referred to as the doing business as, or DBA. So if you're operating under any other name, as a sole proprietor, other than your legal name, or if it's a business and you're say, for example, ABC Corporation, but now you want to set up, you want to be known as, some sort of like a lawn business or a hair salon, not ABC Corporation, you can file a DBA under the name that you want for your business, but it'll show that ABC Corporation owns that DBA. Sometimes people do that if they've got a complicated corporate name, maybe a lengthy corporate name, and they want to go by their acronym. So then they will file, a DBA for just the acronym, and it'll show that that particular acronym is owned by this corporation with a lengthy name. Before you register your fictitious name, you have to advertise it in a county newspaper, and you renew this filing every 5 years. It's not annual, it's just every 5 years. And you need to re-register if there's any change in the business ownership. So additional filings for small businesses are, you may need to file with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, depending on what your business is, because some businesses do require a license. Massage businesses, salons for certain activities, professionals, architects, contractors, that type of thing, they will have to, they have to have a license from the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. And then certain people associated with the business may also have to be licensed. Then the Florida Department of Revenue. If you're going to have any sort of payroll, if you're going to pay yourself or anyone else, you're going to need to file with the Department of Revenue. If you've got a retail business or a business that has to collect sales tax, you're going to need to register for that. You have to report newly hired and rehired employees, and you also have to report independent contractors that are earning more than a certain amount per calendar year. Currently, it's $600 per calendar year. So you're still going to have to file with the Department of Revenue, even if it is an independent contractor with a 1099. I know a lot of people think that, oh, I'm just going to hire somebody to help me with my business. I'm going to give them a 1099 and nobody will know, and then I don't have to do all that payroll stuff. But that's not true. That's a more complicated topic, the distinctions between an employee and an independent contractor. But you do have to make that filing with the Department of Revenue. So if you are improperly classifying someone as an independent contractor as opposed to an employee, you've already got this filing going and somebody has eyes on it, you could draw attention to yourself, and then there could be penalties associated with that. But like I said, that's a whole presentation in and of itself. And then lastly, you may need to make a filing with the Division of Workers' Compensation, because depending on the type of business you have and the number of employees, you may need workers' compensation insurance. So it's required for all businesses that have 4 or more employees, whether they're full-time or part-time, and construction businesses have to have coverage for every employee. So they're pretty complicated rules dealing with workers' compensation, but that's just something to keep at the back of your mind. And then there's a website called openmyfloridabusiness.gov, and it's listed up here on the presentation. And that's where you can get more information about permits, licenses, and registrations, because that's the state of Florida's official business information portal. And then the last topic that I was going to cover is business contracts. And this is going to be very short and succinct, but basically it is so important to put agreements in writing. Because small errors can have really big consequences when things don't go as planned. And, let's be frank, does anything ever go as planned? So if someone leaves the business gets involved in litigation, or you just have a dispute with the person you're in business with, if it's not in writing, it's just he said, she said, and it's really can be a big problem. Question?
Yeah, we just like to recommend that people get their own lawyers, even if there's 2 people in business. Don't use the same lawyer. That happened like X,
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of problems.
Well, that's correct. The comment was that when there are 2 people in business, each person should have their own lawyer. And yes, I totally agree and would highly recommend the same thing, because you need someone watching out for each individual that's involved in the business, not just the business. But absolutely, just if you take one thing away from here, it's like put your agreements in writing. Whether it's something that you're selling to someone or a service you're providing, just don't go on verbal agreements or handshake agreements. You really need to have it in writing. Because it doesn't really matter what you understood the agreement to be. It's going to be up to a court, basically, if it gets to that point, and what a court determines, based on what everybody agreed. It's just a big mess. Put it in writing. So some of the things where you need to have a contract: commercial lease agreements, property and equipment leases, when you purchase real estate or purchase any other asset, contractor, subcontractor agreements, maintenance agreements, vendor agreements, independent contractors. If you're hiring somebody to be an independent contractor, you should have an agreement with them. Non-disclosure agreements, those are very important, particularly if you do have confidential information about your business and maybe you're talking with someone about doing some sort of business transaction or possibly a merger or something, or a joint venture, anything like that. Before you discuss your personal information and let them start looking at your files, you probably want to have a non-disclosure agreement. And the last thing that we put here is a non-compete agreement. But non-compete agreements are really not looked upon with great favor, and it's entirely possible that they may not even be legal, except in certain circumstances, much longer. But currently they are, but they're very limited. You know, they have to be limited in time, which is like basically less than 2 years, and duration. You know, so you, depending on the circumstances, but most times it's, you know, got to be a very limited area where you can have a non-compete. But that absolutely, if that is important to you, like for say a salesperson or someone that has access to a lot of confidential business information, that would be something that needs to be in writing if it's going to, you know, even if you even hope to have that enforced. So those are all the slides that I have. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, I have some questions.
Okay, I think, okay.
So when we're keeping track of expenses, how do we keep track? What kind of information do we use a certain kind of a journal? Because I looked online, I could not find a journal that really helped with expenses in the business.
Well, you need a bookkeeper for that, probably. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of something like QuickBooks. So, because it's just like so easy to do. So I'm a big fan of QuickBooks, and that is very intuitive, and it walks you through that. And it takes the bookkeeping, the need for bookkeeping knowledge out, because like I said, it walks you through that and it makes the entries for you as it needs to. But I would recommend that, and you can get, you know, like,
A big learning curve to learn how to use it?
well, I guess it depends on how tech savvy you are, but I don't think so.
I just switched us all over to QuickBooks Online from the desktop version, and online's much easier. Oh, online? It's very, yeah, QuickBooks Online, you don't want to do the desktop version. in my
Yeah.
version.
Well, and I think QuickBooks is, you know, trying to move everybody away from the desktop version. The other good thing about the online version is that, you know, your accountant can see very easily, because I just know that the businesses that I'm with, that way, everybody in the business, they can be online at the same time, as well as the accountant. The accountant can just go in and get access to the information, because whenever you have the desktop version, if you want to send information to your accountant, you have to download a file and send it to the accountant. The accountant does stuff to it, sends it back to you, and then you have to update it, and it's really a pain.
You have to give them your password into your account, is that what you have to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you have the online, yes. But you know, I highly recommend that as opposed to trying to teach yourself bookkeeping. But at the very least, you should write them down in a notebook somewhere, because who's going to do, you know, figure out if you, you know, do a return. Because even if you just have it as a schedule to your income tax, you know, you still need to have things written down, and you're probably getting someone to do that for you. But QuickBooks is good. If you are really serious about running a business and you've got any kind of, excuse me, money involved, you know, I highly recommend, you know, that. And there are other accounting, that's just what I'm used to. So I'm not, you know, I'm not getting paid a fee to recommend QuickBooks. Okay, did you have a question?
Yeah, in regards to business contracts, do you know of any sites that have like templates on how certain contracts should be written? Like for instance, if, I'll just use myself, if myself and another individual are gonna go into business together, I'm trying to figure out what type of template to use to kind of hold her accountable and myself accountable as I gain ownership in the business?
Well, I would either recommend that you get a lawyer to help you with that, or try one of there's a lot of different sites where, what is it, Rocket Lawyer or something like that, at least where they have a lawyer that will help you with that. Because you want to make sure that you're including the necessary things in your agreement that a particular template may not have and you may not know to include.
Yeah, you can also try LegalZoom or Termly, like terms, but Termly, they also have like a, yeah, you can do like a subscription, it's not that expensive, like they have all the templates, policies, and they are, I think if you go to the like more pro, they have a lawyer which one reviewing all the agreements and update it for you, yeah, so.
In the beginning of this presentation, you mentioned about a 50% discount application doing business with us. What was that about?
The application fee, you will get 50% off.
15, 1, 5, or 5?
50%
Off of what?
of the application fee.
Application.
Application fee for business tax, for your, the type of business that you have. You will get like, it's $19 application fee, you will get it half off of that. Then you apply for your business.
You will get the discount.
Okay, I'll have to ask you after.
Yes.
Okay. And then the other thing you mentioned, trademarking your name. Where do you go to do that?
Okay, well, trademarking can be done at the state level. That's also done on Sunbiz. It can be done at the federal level. But again, that's a whole nother presentation on, but if that's something that you're actually interested in, you can go on to first of all, you can check on Sunbiz and see if anybody else has registered a trademark locally. Because basically you can only register, I mean, this is a generalization, but you can only have a trademark for where you're actually in business. So if you've got a cupcake shop in Port St. Lucie, you can't trademark your name throughout the entire United States because you're not in business throughout the entire United States. You would be basically trademarking it locally. Well, that's if you actually are doing a lot of business online, you may be able to do that. But, it just depends. So usually the first step might be, so that you don't have someone else in Fort Pierce using your same name and, or, in Orlando and confusing people. Maybe you start with the Florida trademark. And then you can move on to the federal trademark, but it is very easy to go on it's the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and I believe the website is uspto.gov. And you can do a search and see if the name you've chosen has already been trademarked. But it gets a little complicated because the trademark is for the particular type of business. So you can have different businesses can have the same trademark, but they're in different categories of business. So if you've got a cupcake business there with a particular name, you could also have a landscaping business with the same name. Like Dandy Daffodils or something like that. Maybe that's the name of your cupcake business, but you could also have a landscaping business or a seed mail order company or something like that with the same name. So you need to, when you're doing the searches, you have to go with the different categories. But that gets very complicated. But that's basically what I meant. And if you're starting off locally, we usually recommend until you actually get a serious online presence with customers, not just one or two customers throughout the company, throughout the country, but whenever you've got a really serious online business, then you can go with the federal filing. Did we have any questions online in the chat?
No, there's no questions from the chat.
Okay, anything else?
Regarding a business plan, is there a site that you recommend, or does it all have to be your attorney? Just quick and easy.
Well, I don't have a site to recommend, but I would just Google, business plan, particularly for the type of business that you want, and you can see what a business plan looks like. But, you don't need an attorney to draft a business plan. That's basically going to be you sitting down, like, what exactly am I going to do? Where am I going to do it? Where am I going to get the money from? Where am I going to get my customers? How am I going to reach my customers? But that type of thing. But yeah, just Google that and you could probably find one. Well, if there's no more questions, that's it for me. So thank you for being such a good audience and being so involved and having so many questions. And thank you. And I don't have any, this is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for such an informative presentation. We really appreciate you and all the assistance that you're providing to our customers and our citizens. Thank you so much. And on that note, I want to close with a quote. And there it is. There are no secrets to success. It is the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. That was Colin Powell. Okay, and I'm gonna give you some, we do have, this is an amazing workshop or business expo, I will say. It's gonna be on January 18 this year from 9 a.m. to 12. It's gonna be in the community center right here on Airoso. And we're gonna have a lot of agencies from the state. We will have the Department of Agriculture, to mention some, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, IRS is coming also. So if you are interested, this is open, it's a free expo for all of you, all of us, and it's gonna be held again here in the community center in Airoso Boulevard. Also, we are gonna have in February a continuous workshops, actually throughout the entire year. And just check our website, Business Tax @0PSL, and for more information regarding more workshops. If you have more questions or any questions from the public, well, thank you so much for your attendance. If you have any questions for us in the future, we are here for you. On behalf of our department, Business Tax, thank you so much for being in here, and we are open to the public from 9 to 12, walk-ins and appointments only from 1 to 4, and here at second floor, City Hall. Thank you so much. Have a good one.